So this is Dave from Open Mind Saturated Brain with Matt. Matt, just who are you and why am I talking to you?
Hello, I am Matt and/or Matthew. I sing in a band called Foxmoulder, and I have been / do run a label called The Mountain Far for the last 5 years, and this is the eve of my final show for it.
Right on, right on. Okay, so let's start with Foxmoulder. Why the name Foxmoulder?
I'll be totally frank, it was a complete joke, and it's been taken way too far. The original four of us, because we had a different drummer when we first started, we had like a Facebook group, and we had been jamming. I think we had written like 2 songs, and we were kind of like, what are we doing, name-wise? Started pitching a whole bunch of random ones, and then I suggested Foxmoulder as like a complete joke, and all the other dudes were like, sweet, let's do it, and I was like, I really wasn't serious, but it was kind of the best thing we had, so it stuck, so.
No, I love that name, and people that I talk to, I'm like, who's this, Foxmoulder? That's an amazing band name.
Yeah, I know, it's, we got, yeah, it's amazing that isn't done to death already, frankly, but thank you, yeah,
It worked out pretty well.
It's been a fun title, to say the least, so.
Right on. Can you reveal anything interesting or perhaps what not well known about yourself or the other band members?
Okay. We're from 4 pretty radically different walks of life, I suppose you can jokingly say. I'm the only one from Toronto myself. I'm born and raised in the city, not far from here actually. Matt is from Metro Detroit. He's a Michigander. Rohan is from India originally actually. He's from Mumbai, but he will insist on calling it Bombay if you ever ask him about it. And then Peter is from St. John's, Newfoundland originally, so he's like an old school Newfoundlander. So we've got 4 radically different dialects in the band, it's actually pretty fun. We have a pretty diverse thing. So I guess in a way you can jokingly call us a very Torontonian band. Rohan plays guitar, Matt plays bass, Peter plays drums, and I, air quotes, sing.
Okay, so how was the band chronologically assembled? You were saying that you had a different drummer as well.
Yes, it originally started, Matt, Rohan, and I had been kind of talking about jamming and starting a band for a while, but we didn't really know any drummers, and it literally occurred that we were drinking too much one night and started on this huge, like, I don't know, existential kind of tirade about like, why not right here, why not right now? It sounded like a Rage Against the Machine song or something, so we were just like, who do we know? And I was like, I know this guy, his name is Selvin, so we jammed and then kind of went from there. So that's kind of it. It was like, Matt, Ron, and I were just like, nerds, and we go to these shows and really enjoy the music, and we were like, why haven't we started our band yet? Like, let's start a band. So it's kind of it, really, I guess. Just kind of like, it was a matter of, I think you could say it was just one of those like, fuck it, let's just like pull the trigger and actually do this thing, like. I guess to summarize, lyrically it's kind of all over the place, just in terms of how I'm feeling, in terms of where my personal motivation lies. So I like to think of myself as fairly human. I get frustrated. I can be incredibly critical of myself, and I feel like I get a lot of personal growth out of sometimes being able to call myself on my own shit. So sometimes I am addressing myself, even if it doesn't sound like it, lyrically speaking. But yeah, then there are also times where I'm clearly kind of fuck youing at a few people as well. So it kind of be all over the place. I just try and make it like, and I try, I guess a good way to put it. It's like a hyperbolic but frank conversation. It's just like, you know, obviously I'm wordy and I say some kind of unnecessary kind of things, like, you know, most people don't wonder what the hell I mean when I say lathe, but like, I guess that's just like the English degree. I'm kind of sapping into my headspace sometimes. So.
Okay, so we were talking about Orchid earlier. When I first heard Breath of the City, I honestly quickly just thought, that's my new Orchid. So what are your thoughts after hearing that?
Well, that's like a huge compliment, obviously. I remember I think that's the only song from the demo we ever really play anymore, and that's kind of still rare. We haven't played it since Newfoundland, but yeah, I remember when we first wrote that song. I think it was the third song we wrote. I remember being like, Ron, man, we gotta have like some like big intro track, you know?
It works.
Yeah, I personally love that song. That song is, yeah, very important to me too. It deals with kind of just the frustration of like being from a city that feels like a very transient place where your identity can be kind of so haphazard and kind of feel like it's dependent on who surrounds you at any given time. But also the idea of wanting to like, for better or for worse, Toronto will be my home. I like Toronto a lot, but I can't pick up and leave. I don't have that kind of luxury or that privilege. So yeah, it's kind of about the frustration of just like wanting to actually be like, rather than just saying like rather than turn tail and run, actually kind of fight to make your home a better place. And that, I think, spreads across a variety of different kind of facets of all of our personal lives, and just kind of being like, even for myself, like there are lots of elements of my personality I'd love to ignore, but instead I fight to kind of become better. And it can be an incredibly slow process, and there are certain things about myself that I'm still working on, but day by day, a little bit better here or there. So.
Quick question, do you feel like people label you as a pessimist because you are critical of yourself? Because that's what I find in my life, as I'm critical of myself and I'm called a pessimist. Does that happen to you?
Yes and no. I'll more often than not be called a downer.
Okay. Like, I haven't had that one. I'm a pessimist, you're the downer.
Which is a fair enough statement, I guess. Like, but that's also because I tend to. What's that, man? I tend to project, Dave. Yeah, I tend to project my personal frustration sometimes, and also, I'll be frank, I can read people pretty well, for better or for worse. So that's from maybe an experience of just having like a lifetime of shitty experiences, but you know, a lot of amazing ones too. Don't get me wrong, but I can usually see through people really quickly, and it sucks to be that guy because even when you're right, it still sucks.
Yeah.
No one appreciates that. As like whether it's your friend or like, you know, someone you're, you know, closer to, family, when you're just being like, no, that person sucks. Don't go near them. Like seriously. And then, you know, you spend all this time kind of they trying to prove you wrong, you're trying to prove yourself right, and then like even when it does turn out to be true, which unfortunately for myself often or not has happened, it ends up being like, sorry. Like I don't even want to I told you so. I just want to be like, I'm really sorry. Like the only reason why I do it is because I personally know what that feeling is like to get kind of like suddenly burned. And yeah, I guess that's kind of like a defense mechanism. So I don't know. We'll see. I am in therapy, so clearly it's not doing me all the justice in the world. So yeah.
Well, the whole thing is that it helps and hurts, right? You're trying to help, but it hurts them at the same time, and it goes back and forth from there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so back to Foxmoulder. What are your future plans regarding recording or touring or anything?
Oh my God, I wish I could say for sure. We're such a scattered group of guys, which is awesome. Like I'm in a band with a bunch of creative and really kind of like interesting people who do lots of cool things, minus myself clearly, but. Who knows? Like the hope is right now we're gonna write a full length, like maybe like a one-sided 12-inch or something. And like we have had vague conversations about flying to Texas and doing a West Coast tour. So which would hopefully be with Forwana, but that's like such a next year kind of plan. So I don't want to go too crazy with my ideas just yet. Mm-hmm. That's the hope. We'll see. Matt has been considering grad school, which would take him back to America. So I guess we'll have to see what happens, and then. Yeah, I would love to keep going, but at the same time, I think I'm also quite aware of that this stuff, you know, it can sap your energy and your strength and your money, and sometimes you can't force it. So that's right now, as we're in a very kind of casual, since we got back from our tour back in April, we've only played maybe a handful of times. And then just trying to kind of, I guess, when it feels right, it'll feel right, and then we'll push. So we just wrote our first new song in 6 months, so I haven't even done all my lyrics yet for it, so we'll see what happens. I'm optimistic, though.
Nice.
right, so it's been like 8 months since we talked last. What's happened in the last 8 months?
I have shaved. Not the last few days. Let me see here. We got a new drummer, and we finally put out our records. So before, there was this period where I was like, I just want to be able to have one piece of vinyl out, and now there's 4. So it's kind of funny how that all tends to happen. We got a new drummer. We did a short tour with the band The Caution Children from Florida, which was awesome. And then subsequently our drummer moved home to British Columbia, and we are now in we have another new drummer. So it's been kind of a wacky up and down period. But yeah, things are pretty good. We're just gearing up to play, I guess, yeah, probably 4 or 5 shows the rest of the summer. So, which is more than we've played in the last, several months. So I'm pretty excited about that.
All pretty ridiculous shows too. So. We'll go into that later. Also, you, bass player.
Yes. Oh yeah. Matt is literally just about to move back home to America because he's going to start graduate school in Baltimore. So we subsequently now have a new bass player. Officially, he's filled in for us before, named Darren, and he's actually Ron, our guitar player's other roommate. So we're just doing that. So yeah, which is good. Darren is a charming white collar man with a business degree, and yeah, he plays the bass real good.
Now, when I talked to you last time, it was the last Mountain Far show, and that was not the last Mountain Far show, right?
Well, it was.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
It was last Mountain Far show. I basically retired my old label at that particular show, which was also my 100th under that name. And I subsequently took some time off, and then I guess I started. That was like one of the very few shows I had done that fall in general. So that was part of kind of my break. And then I guess starting in like March or so, I started doing shows again under a new title, which is Always Autumn. And then so that's been good. Slow. I've got some, but it's kind of how I like it at the moment, as my life is very chaotic. But yeah, just basically a similar concept. I'm not really returning to the label element right now because God knows I still have to take myself out of the debt of the previous one. But basically just doing shows still for a bunch of the incredibly talented friends I have. But one of the only real rules is that I only use alternative spaces. So I've only been using houses, galleries, lofts, that kind of thing. Because those are personally my favorite kinds of shows. So those are the kinds I wanted to stick to. So rather than compromising and running a show in a bar or something like that. So,
are there any other differences besides where you had the show from your old organization to your new one?
I think a big thing with just the difference is that with a Mountain Far, I felt like there was a number of times where I compromised because I thought I had to do things a certain way to be like a real promoter or something. And
can you give us an example?
Yeah, I mean, I've booked some relatively well-known bands now. And which is cool, but like when you're dealing with like contracts and booking agents from other countries emailing you these kind of obtuse questions about, what it means to be a DIY promoter, and kind of like this kind of assumption that makes me really sketchy and weird things like that. So, and then dealing with the fact that like real venues often have this kind of like almost like a bid process where it's like, well, this show sounds like it makes more money, so we're just gonna go with them instead. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, weird things like that. So I felt like there was a bit too much of the business end of things were leaching into stuff, and I was much more interested in kind of just forwarding bands that were like in it for the right reasons, and not just looking at me like another pay drop or like stop to kind of make X amount of money. So yeah, that was kind of a big thing. So.
Okay, cool. You just had the Coma Regalia split 5-inch come out. What did you want to say about that?
It is I don't know, a joke gone too far. It was said like, Sean, we should put out a 5-inch because we only have 2 minutes of material, and Sean naturally was like, totally, okay. So that happened. So yeah, I mean, we've done like 2 tours now with Coma Regalia through the Midwest. A short one, our first ever tour, and then we did a good week or so with them in the last one. So they kind of feel like, our best bud band. So it felt like natural to want to do a split together. And I think, it was good too, because it was some material that I think both of us were like just starting to do as things were when we were on tour together, and things were kind of maybe changing around a bit. So, and it was good, and it was probably like the first real step towards kind of getting some momentum back in the band. So that's been really good, and Sean put a tremendous amount of work into them. They're very complicated little pieces of vinyl, and I'm excited to finally have them since you brought them into my abode just now. So it's always funny to think when a record you're on is like in the UK before you've got them or something. So that's fun.
Other random people have them, and you haven't even had them.
Yes, exactly.
You're recording.
Who knows where that thing is at this point? So.
What did you want to say about Pine? It was the last song recorded with
Peter and Matt.
Right.
Yeah, probably my favorite song we've done so far, which has been good. And it's a pretty all our songs are fairly personal, but it was a particularly personal one because it was written even while on tour, about being on tour, and I had just come out of a very long-term, very serious relationship, and the song was kind of just specifically about how the concept of like I was pining. I was just very like miserable. It was like 2 months after a 3.5-year relationship kind of ended, and there was just a lot of questions in my head and feeling really kind of I guess isolated by that, and so as such it just kind of it rhymes off a lot of kind of thoughts that go through your head, and kind of so less than pleasant things, and as well as kind of like there is a bit of optimism there, but I think it was like a chapter closer, was I guess that you could put it. It was a bookend for it. So
could you relate that to the Faraway Friends songs from the Swollen Lungs comp, or?
I suppose that song was written a little bit before that. I think we actually were working on Pine as Faraway Friends was written, because Faraway Friends was so short, and it was specifically for a comp of short songs. So that was kind of just like, I think, and particularly when you only have like 2 or 3 sentences in order to make kind of like a statement, that was kind of, I mean, it was born from a similar period of my life, where it seemed so much easier to think about the distant friends that you have in various parts of the world or another country that only really see you in these snapshot moments, and it's so much easier to kind of maintain the illusion of being, a steady, kind of stable person. So that was literally just the idea. I was even talking with my partner about this recently. I said that the basic concept of that was just like, she's had similar, like she travels a lot when she's kind of has her own things going on. And I said it's literally like every time you meet this new person, or you see these people that don't really see you very often, you have kind of, it becomes a new opportunity to kind of, in that sense, rewrite a small chapter and just be like, well, things weren't good, but now they are, or they are great with you, so why not forward that idea through everything? So I think that was me trying to push forward the idea of like, I'm going on tour. I mean, we recorded the song on tour, so I should focus on kind of the weird existential part of it, but also the positive elements too. So.
Band member in Respire.
2 band members in
Respire.
Yeah,
Darren, yes, that's true. What do you want to say about them? And I'll throw it there first. They're awesome.
They're okay. Ron and Darren have been friends and have been playing together for so long. I met them both together because they were in this old band, which most people would have known as Delatruda, but even before that they were called No Alarms, and that was when I was very early on booking and stuff. So it amazes me that they're very well suited together. They write really well together, and they both also complement each other in terms of like, they'll even be like, oh yeah, so-and-so's more technically minded, but I'm a better writer, and they kind of like actually know how to kind of focus on those strengths and weaknesses. So that's part of the thing I'm excited about having Darren in our band too now. Yeah, it's really cool. It's definitely they're doing a really good job marrying obviously the various kind of elements of kind of like shoegazy, black metal-y.
It's not one genre, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I just jokingly been referring to them as like Sunbather band. So, but yeah, they're really good. And I've constantly said that I think there needs to be more trumpet and various emo influenced music. So I'm a fan of what they've got going on with Emmett. So.
So much here. Talk to me about the show coming up with United Nations and the fact that Jeff Rickley is going to be there.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's a very similar thing happens whenever we get to play with like slightly bigger bands like that, which particularly some of the younger like emo kids will always go, "Oh man, how did you get that?" And I asked, and there's just kind of like a shrug because I'm like, that's kind of all you can do really. So, I mean, that should be interesting. Thursday were like a huge kind of pivotal thing for me when I was like 17, 18. I still have this like Thursday shirt that I got when I was, I think, 17 when I saw them at the Opera House a long time ago, which was one of the most like, that was like the first time I remember seeing just how drastically different like an emo type crowd could respond to music at a show. Just me and strangers just kind of like grabbing hold of each other and just kind of singing along, and it's got this like tear in the armpit, and it's got this weird oil stain on it, which I don't know where that came from, but it's out of every, like I purge my shirts every like 3 months, and somehow it keeps being there. So that's, I don't know. So I was thinking about like wearing that or whatever, or doing something with it. Yeah. But yeah, I've been kind of joking around and being like, I was gonna confront him and be like, "Hey man, like you could have done a better job of explaining that there was emo outside of Victory Records, because that shit was confusing for like a 17-year-old." But yeah, this should be interesting. It's funny. I was thinking, because we have mutual friends. Even like he's friends with Tom from Capacities and stuff. And Tom was even actually at one point, Tom told us that he was asked to be in United Nations.
No way.
But
that's crazy.
Yeah, so I think I was thinking that I'm just going to straight up be like, it's nice to meet you officially in this capacity. Like, I once hugged you when I was like 17 or whatever. And I would really appreciate it if you actually watched my band and like told me what you think. And if he doesn't, then he's dead to me. But if he does, then it's like cool, yeah. And honestly, Thursday's one of those bands that I didn't keep up with quite the same way. But I went to the full Collapse tour, and I actually thought No De-Evolution was a good album. So it was cool to see them progress. It's just, I guess maybe people didn't progress as much with them. So I'm excited to see United Nations in the flesh and kind of see what all hoopla is about. So
I remember reading about them before they even recorded anything. We're going to write stuff that's influenced by Seisha and Joshua Fit for Battle, and my pants dropped at that point.
Yeah, the theory behind that band has been around forever, because I remember being like one of the dudes from Glassjaw, like the drummer of Converge, and then there was this whole thing where it's like, I mean, they're not really in the band because they're under contract.
Right, they were masks.
Yeah, that's the whole mask thing. So I remember just being like, oh, okay, fair enough. And so it's funny too, because I think there's even still I think there's never any confirmation of who's in that band besides Jeff. Yeah. So now I've heard it's like the drummer from Pianos Teeth is drumming with them, but I mean, who
there's
even
no
knows?
Contractual obligation as far as I know.
Who's going to be drumming for them live? I don't even know, because I think I remember seeing photos of the first ever show that they did, and I think Jeff was playing bass or something. Instead, they had someone else singing for them, so it was like, I don't even know. It's I feel like if they actually maintain being an active thing, it'll be interesting, just because they'll be one of those bands that requires some research to even fully kind of understand. And God knows that's something that I think most emo music nerds are that's something we want to do, is we want to know what the hell was going on. So that's always an entertaining little puzzle to put together. So yeah, that should be a fun show.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to talk at all about the last show with the Cinderblock show? Was
with Matt and Pete.
Yeah. I think of it as the Cinderblock show.
That was like a really fun show. Our record release back in the beginning of March, and
it was a double record release. Really,
it was, yeah, because we got the split and Life at the same time, and
Normally, under most circumstances, like that kind of thing would stress me out so much because we had to actually like assemble the records there at the show, and there was 2 out-of-town bands playing. There was 5 bands in total, and I think that was one of the first times, and this was by an active effort under this new project, is just to actually like chill the fuck out a little bit and not let everything completely like. Just because there were times where I'd just be like staring at, and I mean, I love them to death, and they know that I feel this way. But Animal Faces like have this tendency to take like 25 minutes to like tune, and I'd just stare at them, and be like, why, like why, please, just play. So like an example like that. This time I was just like, okay, like and they're like, oh okay, and then I was like not getting all super stressed. But yeah, it turned out really wonderfully, and people actually stuck around for us because obviously you have to play last at your record release, as I've been told. So that was pretty wild, and people responded really well, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, right, people actually kind of give a shit, which is nice because we hadn't really played either since I think November. And yeah, it was a nice way to kind of send off Matt and Pete.
Don't forget about the body surfing.
Yeah, both Matt and myself were body surfed, and
well, Rohan too, but he body surfed into you.
Yes, that was a whole thing. Yeah, so and yeah, there's all this footage online too, where at first I was like, oh, exciting. There's like 2 different angles of me being crowd surfed, but then I realized just how near death I was because like actually there's several angles I think. Some young guys as well. The singer of Sketchbooks, Luther, also was filming for like this little documentary he was doing for his film project. So like there, I realized that like I did not expect to be picked up. I literally there's this grabbed this guy, fell over, and then the song kind of changed, and I guess everyone was like, oh, I guess this was our thing now.
It's time.
I remember being like on the ground, being picked up by an angle and being, oh my god, it's happening. So, and then being up there and stuff. But then, as I was still kind of being raised up, like they totally almost dropped me like neck first on the drum kit, and it's in the footage. Like I'm like, I totally almost fucking died, like so bad. And I'm very famously conservative in terms of my. I'm not a very fun person, as some people know me. So I'm not normally the type to be like, yeah, fucking crowd surf me, because I totally would have been like, no way, I'm gonna get injured. And the funniest thing is that like in my head when I got put down, it was so smooth because it was like right into our next part. But then I just fall straight backwards into the drums, and it's kind of like I cringe a little bit when I see it. But yeah, it's really funny. And right at the end of the set, I got like pushed headfirst into a cinder block because Ron knocked my water bottle over, and all I kept thinking was, oh no, what if someone slips? So I like reached down to get it, and then I realized someone had picked him up and tossed him, and he just like decked me into this thing. I had definitely never been that beat up after a show, and I've been playing probably over the years. I've played like over 100 shows, so that was nice. That felt like, and honestly, it revitalized me because when we did that mini tour, I felt like completely different when performing. Like I was telling my partner this, is that I for years, I guess maybe part of this was like a negative headspace I received, and I always thought I was this brittle, frail person that would just like if I did that, I would break something. If I did that, I'd be seriously injured. And I do have bad knees. I just got an MRI myself, so I was always like really worried about that kind of thing. But suddenly I was like, no wait, I can actually like kind of actually kind of really lose myself out there in what I'm doing and not be. I'm not as fragile as I think. So
just don't watch the footage afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't show my mom it or anything, but yeah, it was good. So that was a really fun time. And
awesome. Okay, I got 3 more questions. First one, let's go with, well, you were talking about shows and having things change, in your head. How has playing longer in a band changed how you play shows, interact with people at shows, or even write songs? Because now you're at 100 shows in, right? I'm sure during your first show, you might have been nervous going up on stage, or
hard to write when I started being in bands, like way back when. Yeah, I mean, when you're like a teenager especially, every show seems like it's going to be the show that breaks you as a band or something. It's like, it's going to be the one that like someone sees us and then offers us that showcase, and then next thing you know, Victory Records, here we go.
It always goes back to Victory.
It always goes back to Victory.
Awesome.
Tony is just that well known. So yeah, I think there is like a lot more weight on it when you're younger, and you honestly think that like that's how music works, right? That someone's gonna see you and just be like, I believe in your vision so much, even though you are all like 16 years old.
Like here is
a bunch of money, and you don't even have to worry about paying that back. Don't worry, that's for you. And so yeah, I mean, there is definitely that delusion. And then, I mean, I played in a hardcore band when I was in university, and that was like less delusional, but still also like, oh yeah, we can totally like rent a van and trailer and go to Ottawa for the weekend and not lose hundreds and hundreds of dollars and stuff. But it was after that I started playing bass in band for the first time, which actually played like, weird kind of showcasey type shows at like the Horseshoe. I remember being like, I'm playing at the Horseshoe, this is really weird. And then we played at the Horseshoe again like 3 months later, and I was like, how does this keep happening to me? So that kind of made me realize that, like, there are forces at play a lot more than talent, which was like, a bit of an eye-opener, and, helps jade you just ever so much. But you realize that there are, that there is a school of thought behind the premise of DIY that really is pervasive throughout kind of the cultural kind of exchange that is punk in general. It's just like how you can look at like a record label that might very well exemplify a lot of those ideas, and then realize like, this could be a business, and I'd like it to be, so I'm going to actually go full for it. And that could be something like, a label like Top Shelf. Yeah, it's an example of that.
Yeah, no, that was DIY first.
Exactly, talking to Kevin, he's just like, yes, this started out as a personal project, and now it's my business. I quit my job. This is what I do, and that's totally admirable. The issue ends up being that there is this like intrinsic balance that needs to be struck between actually having, that where is your real motivation behind what you're doing, and that was something that like it's weird, right? Because when I was running a label, I never thought like, oh, I can sell so many of these. This is why I'm totally stoked to do this. But then there are definitely times where you have your, however many hundreds of copies of a record, and you're like, oh no, no one wants this. So yeah, that can be a bit sobering as well. So yeah, I think the band that got me into a lot of screamo stuff was a band from Mississauga called Strawman Fallacy, and I think after they got kind of blown off for gas money for like the certain number of time in the row, and it was like their 80-something show. I think that's when like Theo or MJ, the two kind of guys I knew the best in the band, were kind of just like, well, punk ideals don't fill the gas tank, man, or something like that. You kind of totally get what that means. Particularly if you've toured the Rust Belt, like I have a couple of times now. You're just like, oh yeah, right. There's a distinctly different idea between donations recommended or something at a show, but. Yeah, I mean, particularly the way I interact with people at shows, I don't know. I'm not gonna lie, the more you do it, the kind of harder it becomes sometimes to really distinguish who's into it for 6 months versus who's into it for 6 years or their entire life. Which is why it can be so sobering to meet someone like Tom from Capacities, who's literally been in all of these incredibly important bands, and kind of tell me that he really respects what I'm doing and like thinks I'm doing it for the right reasons, and just you're kind of like wide-eyed. I'm like, are you serious? So because I think it's very easy, particularly in a style of punk that doesn't really have dividends in terms of financial, or like, none of us are cool people, let's be honest. It doesn't really have those even social gains. So as such, it's you can really question, obviously, the value of it, and kind of be like, am I even like a decent human being? Because that could definitely come up, very particularly, when politics can come into conversation or something. Yeah, so I mean, I think it blurs things sometimes the longer it is, but when you find the bands or the people or the places where you just get that vibe, you definitely kind of are like, yes, immediately, which is really nice. So I think it makes it a little bit harder to distinguish sometimes. So it's like maybe you don't get fooled as much, but maybe you might not recognize something as great as you could have earlier than you might have years before you got a little jaded or tired or whatever you want to say. So yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Have you heard in the last little while? Just like basically the last 8 months, because I think I asked you the same question last time. What new bands have you gotten into, or do you think people should check out?
You know, it's funny. I'm thinking about this lately. Is that the longer you've been into this stuff, it's almost like new things. Often I find a bit. I have a minor aversion to, in a sense that I feel like I know and enjoy so many bands that I'd rather just kind of follow what they're doing and kind of see how that goes. Yeah, new stuff can be a bit like overwhelming at times.
There's so much of it.
Yeah, exactly, and particularly as the awareness, thank you internet, about like emo and screamo and that stuff. Yeah, it can be really easy to just be like, oh Christ, like there, you know, there's so many links that, you know, if you just posted like someone sent me like, you know, new bands of any blank genre, you're gonna get so many freaking links that, yeah. I will say that I just checked out today this pretty interesting band that refers to themselves as street screamo from Belgrade, Serbia, called The Eagle Has Landed, and they just asked us about doing a split with them or something. So, you know, well, you never know. I think, given the last time we were playing, the show that we were at, Black Belt, who opened that show, have since, I think, become like a very awesome local band. Who don't necessarily fit into the mold of being like a screamo band, but very much from that entire family, and they're not socially intertwined the same way that a lot of people are, so the expectations are different, and I think as such, they have the ability to really surprise people, which is awesome, and I feel that for any community to actually stay kinetic and kind of be able to grow and change, they need to be able to be like, oh wow, these guys that I'm not best friends with came in here and like blew the lid off the place, and suddenly, so there is more to this than just us. So I think that they're really great. I don't know what else, new stuff really so much. I mean, generally, I just jokingly will just say like whoever's doing this split with Connor Regalia lately, I'll just check.
Oh,
that
they just
out.
had.
They just
had one.
We had a deal or whatever.
Kokoma has 2 new splits. They've got yours, and they have that other one too.
We had a deal.
The other.
We had a deal.
Oh, that's the name of the
and
band.
then they have that like
Okay.
6-way 7-inch, which is just a lot. Yeah. So I'm trying to think here. Yeah, it's been a bit of a thing lately. Yeah, it's been a bit dry in my head. I think it's also just because getting the band restarted. I mean, Costume Children's new record was fabulous. the band which you're, I believe, doing stuff with, congratulations from Kitchener, have been around for a while, but like never really recorded anything, and they were very kind of like aloof and mysterious in that way, because I think they were kind of just disorganized, but now suddenly I guess they're catching on to the fact that people seem to like it, so it's kind of moving forward, so they're really great. Yeah, there's definitely, and I think it's interesting too to watch bands like Respire that are coming out that are, you know, marrying various other elements, because I think as screamo became popular again, there became this idea that you had to just kind of play like a very straightforward kind of octave heavy, weird stuff, and I think even we're trying to focus on kind of writing things that have that element to us, but are dynamic in its own right, and just kind of like we joked around that we think we're catchier than we should be as
you're branching out almost, right?
Well, yeah, maybe. So, yeah, I have to say that's probably it. Otherwise, I mean, Luna's going to put out a new record soon, which is going to be fantastic. But I mean, I've been following them since they were literally like some of them were basically kids, like back in.
Plus, they were Brain Fever before that.
Yeah,
too,
the first release I ever did, 2009 or whatever it was. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that stuff for sure. And yeah, we'll see what comes out of it. I'm always interested to see what comes out of certain cities too. Like I'm really curious to see like Hamilton, what they're doing. It's a really cool like kind of, it's hard to describe band from there right now, called Black Baron. They're really cool.
I haven't heard them yet, but I've seen them being
it's like
around.
If the Smiths were like a punk band or like a really kind of shoegazy punk band. Like, it's really hard to describe, but yeah, definitely really interesting. So looking forward to seeing that.
Okay, the last question was just, you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, you going by M now.
Yes.
You want to explain that, just so it's an ideology or so that you might want to get across?
Yeah, sure.
Might help other people.
Yeah, I mean, so the M is EM, which is the phonetic spelling of my legal name, which is Matthew. It was actually put forward as a conscious effort to live a kind of more gender ambiguous or kind of nondescript life. It is a conscious effort put forward because I've identified as queer and since a very 14 or something at this point, so I guess almost as long now as I've been alive since I was a kid, so which is, I guess, kind of, I thought about that. That was kind of intentionally put forward because I've never really felt like I fit into a lot of the kind of typical dynamics that fit between particularly how men are supposed to behave. So that was always very frustrating, and particularly because it leaches into your life in so many ways. In relationships I had, both like kind of same sex and with women who I mostly dated, and it just really can be kind of exhausting because it was like to be told kind of like, well, I mean, but you know, a guy when they do this means this, and that was really frustrating. And I think I only kind of avoided looking at it as hard as I did for a really long time because I was very stressed out by the concept of it. And what does it mean? You know, what kind of strain is this going to put on my life? And, you know, who do I feel comfortable talking to about it? And I'm just in a relationship with somebody who is like, you know, a queer person who's also like a very socially justice-minded, and kind of made me actually feel comfortable and confident and kind of being like, you know, you can just, particularly because the public discourse about the subject has changed so much in the last 5 years, where it kind of became like, this is who you are, and you can say that, and then that's kind of it. Like, if people are confused by it, is one thing. If people reject it, that's another, and it's really just telling. And yeah, so that's been really positive, and you know, confusion here and there. My mother obviously has the hardest time with it, not as a theory or why. It's just kind of like she just calls me my legal name all the time. So that's just a conscious effort. I don't really think it changes much about me. It's just one of those kind of things that have come up time and time again in so many situations where I've been so utterly kind of exhausted and defeated by that kind of stigmatization. What am I supposed to be? And I've been talking about it without even realizing, I guess, what I was forwarding idea-wise for quite a long time, complaining, you know, even just interpersonally about like, I don't feel represented by this. And I was briefly in a band years ago where I wrote a song which was all about it. It was actually an incredibly aggressive song, and it was quite funny to think back on it now because I guess I no one even really thought to ask me that much about it. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, fair enough. But like the song "Ascend" from our split with Sarge is entirely about gender, and particularly I had a friend who actually had been going through surgery for gender reassignment and stuff, and it was a very that was something that kind of was like, oh wow, like, you know, this is something that exists around me, and it's not this kind of weird, shameful thing that sometimes I'm made to feel. And it was kind of just that idea of like, I can create the meaning and be my identity, have the meaning that I want it to, without being validated by other things. So yeah, and particularly, you know, growing up in a pretty liberal Toronto upbringing with lots of things like gender and queer and like feminist theory kind of floating around in my head, and it helped me start questioning and asking a lot of these things from a very early age, which helped, because otherwise I think I would have just felt really kind of alone with these, like, I must just be this weird one-off individual. So yeah, that's my conscious kind of effort for that lately, and it's pretty smooth. I mean, some people have a harder time with it than others, but I haven't had anyone respond to me with any kind of negativity.
Yeah, there's no rejection of it.
Well, of course, and you know, that's part of, I mean, it's part of the privilege as well. Like, you know, all it is a name change. I'm not doing anything very drastic, at least right now. But yeah, you know, it's funny because I think the response is very different to me being just like a male-bodied person who's when I put at work, I work with a name tag, and I had to change my name tag, and some people responded just being afraid that they had been calling me the wrong name for the last 2 years, and me being like, no, it's okay, actually, and kind of explaining. And, you know, one member just kind of like got me to explain it to him very briefly, and his response to me was just like, you know, lightheartedly, but like, well, I'm glad you're not my son, and just being like, a few minutes later, I was like, wait, that was actually an incredibly cold thing to say to me. But, you know, versus like, you know, if I had been seemingly like a female-bodied person kind of trying to identify more in like a masculine sense, like I'm just trying to be more neutral. So, and some people just assume strange things like, oh, your name's Annette or something.
Yeah.
Like, fair enough, you know, could be. But then I usually could just as easily be Emma, I guess, and they're just like, what? Like, you know,
You just blew my mind.
so the eyes are just like, oh, okay. But like, particularly as I said, I think just because the discourse has improved so much.